Well, hello there. Welcome into Drummer Daily. Man, it feels good to say that. It's been a long time since I've been able to say, welcome to Drummer Daily. My name is Daniel Hadaway, aka The Drum Coach. And if you don't know, this podcast has been around for a long time. In fact, I just did the math, I just added up. If you count old Drummer Daily episodes, because this podcast was around a long time ago, and then I changed the name to The Practical Pro Musician and tried to make it for everybody for a while. And then I said, you know what? Let's go back to being just for drummers. And so that's what I'm doing right now. But anyway, I counted up the episodes, and we are at over 250 episodes of this show. And so even though we've done that many episodes, this definitely feels like a new beginning. And so I want to welcome you for the first time if that's you, but also welcome back all of my drummer friends. And even if you're not a drummer and you want to stick around and see what this is about, I think you might find some interesting tidbits here for you if you're a musician or interested in being an artist for a living, anything like that. I think that you might find this useful. Now, today's episode, I want to mention something that interestingly enough, sometimes I plan what I'm going to talk about, and then I follow through with it. And I definitely had a plan for what I was going to talk about today. And just so happens that an issue arose right before I started recording this that actually fits right in line with what I wanted to talk to you about today, which kind of just is a jumping off point for us if we've never met or we've never talked before, if you've never listened to this podcast before. So if you've listened to The Practical Pro Musician, you might notice the audio quality of this episode and probably the next few is a little different than what it is in The Practical Pro Musician. Now, the reason for that is that I normally record The Practical Pro Musician, and I plan on recording this podcast in my office, which my office is in the downstairs of our house, first floor, and it has a big window that faces right towards our next door neighbor's driveway. And the next door neighbor, as I got to the office to sit down to record, I've got one of those, I've got my microphone that I use to record with. It's a Shure SM7B. I've got it on one of those cool spring-loaded microphone stands, and I had gathered all my stuff. I have an upstairs studio in the house as well, a place where I do recording normally, which might say, Daniel, why don't you just record in your studio? Point taken. But I have the microphone. My voiceover microphone is somewhere else. Anyway. I get all my computer and everything from the studio space. I go downstairs to begin recording this podcast episode that I'm talking in right now. And right as I get down there, I realized that my next door neighbor, that he was starting to wash his truck. And the way he washes his truck is with a giant gas-powered pressure washer. So the motor was running. And then I was like, well, that's not going to do. So I said, you know what? I need to record this podcast episode for you. And so I went back up to the studio and am now sitting in the kind of the mix position of my studio, recording this episode. And strangely enough, as I got up here to start recording this episode, someone else, I don't know where, but somewhere nearby started running a weed eater as well. And so there's all kinds of gas-powered appliances running outside. So this is just a better spot for this today. But what I was going to talk to you about today in regards to that was something that I've realized a lot, and I get this question a lot from you. And by the way, if you have a question that you'd like for me to talk about or an issue you'd like for me to talk about on this podcast, or if you have a question for me, you can send me an email. Daniel@danielhadaway.com. And Hadaway is spelled just like it sounds, the word had a way. So send me an email. Let me know if you'd like to talk about something on the podcast, and I will do my best to bring it up in an upcoming episode. And I'll even shout you out if it happens. All right, so anyway, what I wanted to talk about, I get a lot of questions about this, is people say, hey, there is no music scene where I live, or there is nobody's as good as I am in my music scene, or I don't know where to meet people, or my cymbals aren't very good, so my drums don't sound very good, or my drums are cheap, or I can't afford a new set of cymbals. If I only got that, that'd be better. Or just a lot of different things that basically all of them say my circumstances are a good reason why I can't do the thing I want to do as a drummer. And while I understand that any situation you're in can make things harder, I do not agree with the idea of making excuses for why something hasn't happened. Now, there's two, and the most common one that I hear definitely is there's no opportunities for me in my music scene, or there's nothing going on. I live in a town that doesn't have anything going on. There's no opportunities in town. Well, it's interesting because I feel like people get that far with that reasoning, or that complaint, or that excuse, whatever you want to call it, and then they just expect the conversation to stop. Like that's like the ace of spades, and you're playing cards. Like nothing can beat it. But that's just not true. There are a lot of solutions to that issue. The question is, are you willing to do those things? The simplest solution of there's not a music scene where I live is to move. Move to a different city. Now, I don't necessarily believe you have to do that, but that's an option. That's one thing you could do. It all comes down to priorities. If you've pre-decided that is not ever going to be an option, you will not move for the sake of music, that's fine. But just know that that is a decision based on your priorities. Don't say that music is the number one priority in your life if you're not willing to move for music, because that means that there's something else that is more important than music to you that is keeping you where you are. And that is 100% fine. I want to be clear, because a lot of times people bring up priorities and they talk about it like it's it's a righteous thing to have to keep your priorities straight, which it is. And also a lot of times people look on the idea of if someone were to say, oh, that's just not a priority for you, that comes across as a negative. But I want you to hear me, and what I'm saying is that's not a negative in this situation. You're going to have to pick what number one priority is in your life, and then number two and number three. To be honest with you, music right now in my life is not my number one priority. I've got my family and other things that are way more important than music to me. And so honestly, if you told me right now, hey, you've got to move to have a music career, I wouldn't do it. But at least you need to arrange your priorities and then make decisions based on that, and then be comfortable that that's the decision you've made. All right, but you can move. To get back to my point, you can move if that is an option for fixing the issue of there's no music scene where I live. Now, beyond that, there is you could develop your prospects for drumming online. We're going to talk a lot about that kind of stuff on this podcast here soon. And so that if you're interested in how you post your own stuff to social media, getting more remote recording gigs, recording remotely, getting into that world as a drummer, the ins and outs of that. Definitely stay tuned to this podcast, because we'll talk more about that. But that's another option is remote recording. Being creative with what you do with your drumming is another thing. A lot of times people think inside the box a lot as far as opportunities for being a drummer, but you never know what other kinds of things there are out there. Have you thought about teaching lessons as a drummer? If you're that good and you like educating as a drummer, have you thought about doing that? Have you thought about local theater that might need drummers, musical theater productions? Have you thought about learning a new genre and expanding your horizons? Things like that are all possible, but don't make excuses and let that be the end of the story. No matter what it is, there always are choices. Now, you may not be willing to make those choices, but if you're not willing to make those choices, stop complaining. I'm being kind of harsh, but I'm saying it kind of in jest. But really, if you're not willing to make a change, if there is an obvious solution to the problem and you're just not willing to make that change, then you need to kind of change the framework of how you're presenting the issue that you have. You could say, I know I'm in a challenging situation right now. I know there's solutions to my problems or to the issues that I face, but I've made some other priorities in my life right now, and that's just where I'm at, and I'm not willing to do those things right now. That would be a more honest way of saying it. And also, it leaves the door open mentally for you to change your mind later and go in a different direction. Either more towards a drumming career or doing whatever you want in drums, if it's just being a better drummer or playing in a certain kind of band or whatever it is that you want to do. It leaves the door open towards moving more in that direction, or also deciding that you want to take a step back from that and go the other way. Either way, don't make excuses. An example, would be, someone who, was the first person, I can't remember who it was, to like visit Antarctica, or someone. I know there's probably people who visited Antarctica before, history was recorded or whatever, something crazy like that. Like the Vikings probably did it, or whatever. But the first modern ship that went to Antarctica, they probably knew it was cold, but they decided to go anyway. And they didn't just say, well, we're going to be cold in Antarctica, we probably shouldn't go. They said, you know what, it's cold in Antarctica, but we probably should find a way to bring fire or make fire when we get there so we can get warm while we're there. Right now, there are scientists that live on Antarctica, and I guarantee you they have a warm place to go each day at the end of whatever they're doing out and about. And so if you look at a place and say the environment dictates how people are in that area, or everyone in a certain environment are going to be a victim of the environment, you're going to miss out on a lot of stuff. Same thing with your music scene. Just because there's not a music scene doesn't mean you can't have a music career where you're at. Doesn't mean you can't have a music career even not where you're at. But you've got to be willing to keep your eyes open and do what it takes. Just don't give up. Don't make excuses and don't give up. So that's what I've got for you today. By the way, I'm not sure which one. You might have noticed there was a little bit of a drum fill at the beginning. I've got a few of those I'm going to kind of rotate through. I'm not sure how many I'm going to end up having. They won't be different for every episode, the little drum thing at the beginning. But they're going to be, I'm going to have several that I'll rotate through so you won't get bored with any one of them too soon at least. All right, well, thanks for joining me. I'm glad that you're back here listening to Drummer Daily, your daily companion for your drumming life. We'll talk again very soon. Bye for now.